1, 2,
3, 4,
5.
Hello, audience. Thank you for being here today for my last speech for Motlow. I'm very excited that this is the last speech. So, I love to read. Like most Americans and people from all over the world, we, as a society, are reading all the time. We read, from the time we get up in the morning, we read the ingredients on on the back of the coffee. We go to the store, we read nutrition ingredients there. We read some kind of magazines in waiting rooms. We read all day at some point during the day, and it's super important. There is something about sitting down and reading. And there's a lovely feeling of when you go into the bookstore of picking up that book and the knowledge that you didn't have before. Do you like to read? How do you read? Would it be a printed book, or would you choose an ebook? And that brings us to our first point, ebooks. You can get online, and the whole internet is at your fingertips for free often, and it's a big draw amongst a lot of people because you can get a lot of information. That is one of the many benefits of having ebooks. You have them in your pocket everywhere you go, on your phone, on a tablet, and it's an easy way of doing things. The negatives of ebooks, however, are also to be weighed in. Han Ho Zhang wrote a comparison of the influence of ebooks versus paperbacks. And in his article, he talks about how students that read paperbacks versus reading ebooks had less eye strain, had better test scores, and had better reading comprehension in the long run than the ones that did the e-textbooks. There's just something about holding it in your hand and reading it. And that brings me to our second point, print books. Print books have the nostalgia factor. The people who wrote these books expected them to be read just like you see here. This is a reprint of a really old classic, which is also my favorite book, and they meant for them to be read like this. In a million years, they would not ever be able to expect that their books would be able to be on a computer or even a computer. So there's just something about that. Also, that brings me to libraries. Libraries, you go in, you do research, you pick out a book. When you're, I think, 8, you can get your first library card, and it becomes a whole thing that you can do for your whole life. And I remember having story time as a kid. It's another way to get involved in your community as well. There's nothing quite like going to a library. Old book smell, it's the best. Amy Craft, in her essay, Books versus Ebooks, The Science Behind the Way to Read, boosts retention. You get better sleep because you're not looking at a screen right before you go to sleep. And it's owning something versus using it. I really like that she said that in her article. That really stuck with me. As a student, it's very important to remember this, that the print is better than the ebook. At the beginning of this semester, I ordered a textbook from Chegg, which is an online rental for textbooks, and it wasn't going to be here for 14 days. So I had the ebook on my computer and was able to access the things I needed for my homework that first couple weeks before my book came in. Well, it was not an easy transition from a print textbook to a textbook online. You can't scroll back and forth between pages. It was not an easy setup online. There's a lot more work going into it than just taking the book out of your book bag and being able to mark your spot and go back and forth. In Vicki Gregory and Kristen Cox's essay, Remember When Ebooks Were All the Rage, A Student's Preference for Print Text, they say that amongst all the students that they talk to, you simply retain things better when reading them through print. It's the way you learn to read most of the time, so that's the way, in your brain, it just processes it differently. David Willoughby has a really interesting perspective because he went to preschools, and his essay is called ABC Ebook Learning in Preschools, an Experimental Study. And he found that in preschoolers, the people who are just learning their vowels and learning to read, They respond better kinesthetically, which means holding it in their hands. There's something about holding something in your hands and reading it in the correct manner that you just don't get from any book. And that brings me to one of my favorite things about children's books that you could never get on a Kindle. This is a Kindle here, and you can see that it's very easily accessible, very easily readable, and it even mimics page turning. But there's nothing quite like sitting down with your kid at night and opening up a book like this with all of these beautiful illustrations added to the text. You wouldn't be able to sit down with your kid and read an ebook at night and have the same kind of bonding time or imagination on a computer or on a tablet that you would holding the book in your hand. So for me, paperbacks win the day. While ebooks are shiny and new and so helpful, they're very convenient, but there's a time and a place for them. I wouldn't go to church with an iPad and read on my iPad and it feel the same as holding my Bible in my hands. So the pros of printed books are nostalgia, scientific research, general retention, and as a student and avid reader, there's nothing like a print book for me. Thank you for your attention.
1, 2,
3, 4.